Hi guys, Robin here from Cheese from Scratch. As you can see, I am down in the barn today. This is my new favorite spot to film. I feel like this is the perfect backdrop for filming my YouTube videos. Today I'm actually going to be teaching you guys how to make homemade yogurt, which I obviously am not going to be doing in the barn, but I thought that I'd do the talking piece of it, telling you how to do it in the barn, and just cover over with the photos and videos that I took up in the house. And it's just going to be that much more aesthetically pleasing. You can hear that it is raining. Oh, it's just the perfect YouTube video spot. So if you don't know me, my name is Robin Jackson and I'm the owner of a business called Cheese from Scratch, a business that teaches homesteaders around the world how to turn their milk into cheese. If you haven't watched any of my videos before, last week I actually was showing how my milk cow just calved. So my milk cow Annabelle just had a little half Normandy, half everything else under the sun little milk calf. And so this week has been all about learning a schedule with her and kind of getting a routine, a milking routine, just kind of ironing out all the little bumps of having a milk cow in her first week postpartum. So that's always kind of a thing. So I shared in my video last week as well that I don't actually make cheese with the milk in the first week after my cow calves, but I do break that rule to make yogurt. And I actually broke that rule on day 6 and made cheese. And I made mozzarella, I made string cheese. That's how I always have to break a cheese making fast with our family, is make string cheese for my husband, who's Wisconsin born. So I made string cheese, it stretched beautifully, it looked so nice, put it in the fridge, and it was just so soft. And that was just due to the composition of the milk. It just wasn't quite ready to be made into cheese. And so I ended up actually feeding it to the chickens just because it kind of turned into a big jelly ball in the fridge basically. And I was not going to feed my family a mozzarella jelly ball. So the chickens were very happy to get that fail. But also, I said in my last video, hard and fast rule, don't make cheese in the first week after your cow calves. And I broke that rule and had a fail. So that was on me. Anyways, so usually in the first week, I will start to incorporate a little bit of dairy products though into our routine. The first one I usually do is yogurt. Yogurt is a very easy homemade yogurt dairy product. And I actually started making yogurt before I even had a milk cow. So if you don't have a milk cow, you're not there yet, you're in the research phase, all you have access to is pasteurized milk from the store, you can still make homemade yogurt for your family, and it's actually really worth it. It ups the value of that milk that you are buying and creates it into this product that you would be paying way more for in the grocery store. So I'm excited in today's video to take you through the steps of how to make homemade yogurt. So the first step of making homemade yogurt is gathering your ingredients. In today's video, I'm going to be showing you how to use a gallon of milk. That can either be raw milk or it can be pasteurized milk from the grocery store, whatever you have access to. Trying to make sure it's as fresh as possible is going to help you to prevent grainy yogurt, just because that milk isn't already acidic yet. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later on in the video. The next thing that you're going to need is either a freeze-dried yogurt culture or yogurt itself. So what this is going to be doing is this is going to be jump-starting the fermentation in your yogurt and allowing it to ferment into yogurt. So freeze-dried yogurt culture you can buy online. My very favorite freeze-dried yogurt culture that you can buy is one from Glengarry Cheesemaking. They only have one on their website and it makes the thickest, beautifulest yogurt. And you use it once and then you can use back slop from your next batches, so it really lasts forever. Like I've had the yogurt culture that I have in my freezer for so long because only every so often do I have to actually use the culture in the freezer. Most often I'm just using yogurt from previous batches and it just keeps going forever, which is the cool thing about homemade yogurt making. You can also just buy yogurt from the regular grocery store and use that as a starter culture for your yogurt making. I like to make sure that I'm buying the highest quality yogurt that you can find at the grocery store. And when you look on the label, you want to make sure that it actually says live active cultures. And the reason for this is that sometimes yogurt brands will pasteurize their milk after they make the yogurt, which is so sad because that just kills all of the good bacteria in that yogurt. But they'll pasteurize it, kills the bacteria, and now you can't use that as a starter culture. So making sure choosing the highest quality yogurt, because those companies have probably used the highest quality cultures to make their yogurt, because that's going to make the thickest yogurt. And also just making sure that on the ingredient list it says live active cultures. So there are so many different yogurt recipes out there. If you Google it, you will find a lot of different results. But basically, yogurt is just kind of a method rather than a recipe. All of those different recipes, they're just following the same method. Step 1 is going to be to heat the milk to 180 degrees Fahrenheit. When you do this, you want to make sure that you're not going to scald your milk, because this can lead to grainy yogurt. So if I'm using the Instant Pot, I try to make sure that I open the valve of the Instant Pot so that the steam can actually escape. And when it heats up to 180 degrees Fahrenheit, it's not going to continue to heat. There's not going to be heat building up inside the Instant Pot. After you have heated your milk up to 180 degrees Fahrenheit, you now have to cool it down to about 110 degrees Fahrenheit. So you can do this by allowing it to just gradually decrease down in heat. This can take hours though, so if you want to speed this up a little bit, I like to fill a sink full of nice cool water and submerge the whole pot into the sink and just come back and stir it every so often. Make sure that you stir that cream scum up, just whisk it right up, that little scum line that has formed on top of your yogurt, and it will just incorporate back into the milk. But this is a way in the sink to kind of rapidly cool that milk down. It still takes probably about 20 minutes, but it's going to cool it down a lot faster for you than just waiting for it to cool down. Once you've reached 110 degrees Fahrenheit, you're going to add in your starter culture. So you can either add in your freeze-dried starter culture by sprinkling it onto the surface of the milk, waiting a few minutes, and then gently incorporating it into the milk, making sure that you disperse it throughout the entire pot of milk. Or if you are using a actual yogurt or a previous batch yogurt, you can take a couple cups of milk out of the pot and whisk this starter culture into these couple cups of milk, and then put that couple cups of milk back into the pot and whisk it with your entire batch of cheese. And this is going to keep you from having lumps left over from that yogurt. So this is a way to kind of make a smoother product for you. Once you have added your starter culture in, you're going to need to ferment your milk in a warm temperature. So some really good examples of places that you can ferment your milk would be in a jar wrapped in a warm towel, put into like a insulated cooler, using a dehydrator, using a crock pot, and my favorite option is actually just to use the Instant Pot, because they have a yogurt setting on there that works really good for being able to ferment your yogurt. One thing that I like to do before I go on to fermenting my milk is pour my cultured liquid milk into the vessels that I plan on storing it in. So I usually store my milk in wide mouth quart jars. So I'm going to pour my milk into these wide mouth quart jars, and this is going to make cleanup way easier. Liquid milk is so much easier to handle than coagulated yogurt. If I tried to pour a big pot of coagulated yogurt into a quart jar, I would just make a splattery mess all over my kitchen. So I like to make sure that I am working with the liquid milk and adding them into the vessels that I plan on storing them in. So you're going to ferment your yogurt for 8 to 24 hours, and after this 8 hours, you're going to pull your milk or your yogurt out of wherever you have been fermenting it and move it into the refrigerator. At this point, it will be quite thick, but it's kind of warm, and once it sits in the refrigerator for a little while, it will thicken even more. After it has cooled in the refrigerator, you're ready to use it for all sorts of different dishes in your home, or just having yogurt and granola in the morning, or however you plan on eating it. Or you can take that coagulated yogurt and go one step further and strain it off into Greek yogurt. So usually I strain it for about 2 hours, and this is going to make a nice, thick, creamy Greek yogurt for you. So as I said, I was going to address a few of the common problems of making homemade yogurt. And the first problem that I want to talk about is not having thick enough yogurt, or coming back and your yogurt hasn't fermented at all and it's still kind of liquid milk. So nothing is more frustrating than that, and especially if you can't figure out what's going wrong. So while I was making the video to show you guys how to make homemade yogurt up in my house, I actually was like doing a bunch of other things, and I wasn't really paying attention, and I ended up cooling my milk down to too low of a temperature. And so I put it into the jars and I put it into the Instant Pot, and then I was just kind of standing there like, oh man, it's not going to ferment properly. So I ended up pulling it out of the Instant Pot, warming it back up to 110 degrees Fahrenheit on the stove, and then adding it back into my jars, putting it back in the Instant Pot, and it was a perfect temperature to ferment. It came out nice and thick. Had I not reheated it back up to 110 degrees Fahrenheit, I probably would have ended up with a really thin, not very good yogurt. So that heat, that warmth is so important when making yogurt, because that's going to allow those bacteria to really ferment properly, and that is what is going to make your yogurt thick. So another reason you might be having troubles with fermenting your yogurt and getting it really nice and thick is your starter culture. So making sure that when you're buying a yogurt at the store to use as a starter culture, that it actually says live active bacteria, and making sure that if you have a freeze-dried starter culture, that it's been stored properly. I store mine in the freezer. Some of them are stored in the refrigerator. They will go bad eventually, or they will become less active. I've really never actually had that problem, but if you have one in there for like years, you might want to be starting to think about that. As well, if you are using backslop from your previous batches, or yogurt from previous batches, eventually you are going to have to switch that out and use a brand new yogurt. And the reason for this is that they just get contaminated, and that can also cause you to start to get slimy yogurt, or just have other problems in your yogurt making. So if you're starting to have troubles, usually the first thing I do if I have been using previous batch yogurt is I start brand new with a new yogurt starter culture. So either from the grocery store or using that freeze-dried one that I keep in the freezer. Grainy yogurt is a common problem that people have, and oftentimes it's caused from places in the milk that actually get over fermented. So if you, as I mentioned at the beginning of this video, if you are using milk that is a little bit older and is a little bit acidic, as that milk actually heats up to that 180 degrees Fahrenheit, it can start to separate into cheese if it's too acidic. So little portions of that milk might start to separate into ricotta basically. And so you're going to have ricotta-like pieces in your yogurt when you go to eat it. You can also have this problem if you are adding in a yogurt starter culture and you aren't dispersing it throughout the pot good enough. So if you haven't stirred it good enough, or there's big chunks of it, you can get concentrated bits of acidification that basically acidify way faster than the rest of the pot. And so they're going to have like a weird grainy kind of texture. Now, oftentimes a good fix for having a grainy texture in your yogurt is to just take your immersion blender and just kind of grind it up. And sometimes this will fix it, but sometimes if it is really caused by that ricotta making at the beginning, you won't really be able to fix it. You're just going to kind of have to live with it. But sometimes the immersion blender will fix it. So just kind of, I don't know, trying it if you've got grainy yogurt. But the best thing that you can do is using the freshest possible milk and making sure you're dispersing your culture throughout the pot good. I will also say another cause of grainy yogurt can be scalding your milk. So always, especially if I'm using the Instant Pot, I make sure I open the valve before I start to heat that milk up to 180 degrees Fahrenheit, because that's going to keep it from continuing to heat higher and higher and higher once it reaches that temperature. So it's basically kind of like having a place for the steam to exit. If you keep the steam in, it's just going to get way higher than you actually want it to get to. And that can lead to grainy yogurt as well. If you have slimy yogurt or yogurts that's separating into basically curds and whey, this is usually your sign that you have a contaminated culture. So I would be changing my culture out and starting with a new one. Sometimes if you add too much culture into your milk pot, you'll also get that separation of curds and whey. But I would definitely start with making sure that you're changing your culture out, because it sounds like something's getting contaminated. Make sure that you clean all your equipment. That's going to help you to make better yogurt, and making sure that you use the freshest possible milk, because that is also going to help you to make better yogurt. I hope in today's video I have talked to you through how to make your own homemade yogurt at home, whether you have fancy equipment like the Instant Pot or whether you are just using a jar and a towel on the counter. Yogurt is so simple to make, and it really does add value to the products that you're able to make for your family. So thank you for watching this video. If you like what you saw, please subscribe, please like the video. And I'm trying to make a video every Monday. I've tried this in the past and it hasn't quite worked out, but I'm really motivated this time. You can also follow along with me over on Instagram. I'm quite active over there, and I show a little bit of our daily life on the ranch here, and milkmaid life and cheese making and all those sorts of things. So thank you guys so much for watching my video, and see you next week.